Damn, son.
That's new.
Yeah, this isn't it. Oh, I'm sure. I'm gonna put myself on mute. Give me 5 seconds, and I will open up for you, Alex. And or do you want to open up for? I do you want to open it up?
I can just talk.
Cool. You know, memento, please. All right, Alex, completely on you.
Cool. Well, I don't know if anybody is joining us so far, but if so, thank you for joining us. Our much delayed next conversations topic is now here. It's just thinking about tribalism. So what it is, and is it on the increase in society today? What I'm gonna try and avoid doing is monologuing. So what I'm gonna just do is give a bit of context to what it is. I think when I mentioned it, however many weeks back, everybody looked at me and said, like, what's tribalism? And I think I'd probably just read it a lot at that time. So what I've gathered in terms of more of a definition is, so what is a tribe, first of all? So groups of people who kind of feel connected to other people in some type of meaningful way, whether that's over some ethnicity, religion, sports, culture, language, anything that is kind of meaningful to them that they can connect and over and share in common. And I think because of the nature of it and the way that it's obviously deeply ingrained in us, you can obviously go all the way back to way back when. I mean, it'll have its roots in science, psychology, all sorts. It's a great survival mechanism for us to bond together, form groups over shared meaningful interests and ideologies and such. Obviously, it creates that us and them type thing. So that is essentially, I guess, what a tribe is. And then from that, what can I suppose spark tribalistic thinking or behavior? And that's what I was kind of getting at when I was like, maybe it's time for us to kind of look at tribalism as an area of discussion. So yeah, that's probably my main kind of definition for it. But I did have a few kind of questions that I've been pondering for a while, in terms of whether, I mean, you could count COVID period, you could count before the COVID period, you could count 10, 20, 50 years back. But for that, I think you need a lot more people on the call from different generations as well. So my main first questions is, do people feel that we've become more tribal in our thinking and behaviors with other people? So for now, I'm going to leave it there and open the floor.
Can I say something actually? So before you mentioned it a few days ago about tribalism, I didn't even know what it was. So now that you've said sort of the definition of a tribe and therefore infer what tribalism is, it's interesting because the definition of community is very, very, very close to that definition of tribe. So I do wonder anyway, I'm going to have to probably let that one for later. As in, what is being a community? What is being doing tribalism? I don't know if there's a difference, or if it's two different terms, I mean the same thing. So with that said,
you're probably right in that they probably are very close together. Although community probably comes with a lot, it doesn't have the negative connotations that it can have, that tribalism can have. Community, I think, and this is just kind of when I hear community, what I hear is people coming together for shared positive interests within their community and their like wider society. So, you know, a community of people coming together over something to better their community in that way. That's, I suppose, when I think of community, what comes. I rarely think of a community coming to, you know, destroy their community in a way when I think of community. But it's funny, yeah, I've never really thought of the two together until you mentioned it.
It is interesting. So are people being more tribal than before? I think in a way people have a lot of opinions. People like to share their opinions and they like to feel heard. And these days there are many platforms where that's the norm, where you give your opinion, you share it, and there'll be lots of people are completely against your idea, and there'll be lots of people that will say yes to something that you say. So I guess it has given more, I'm going to say, permission, ability for people to feel like they are part of a bigger group with the same voice. That's my view.
Anything to add, Dr. Edwards?
Yes. Yeah. Wondering where to hit it off from. So going to tribe, I think tribes of indigenous countries, right? And those tribes obviously sometimes warred against each other and sometimes were for each other. And then when you kind of copy and paste those kind of things, of which is kind of based in survival, one of the things of which are heavily kind of fast forwarding that forward and applying that to modern day society, we're not necessarily fighting for survival anymore, but we are fighting for a sense of belonging. Hence, chiming into what Sonia just mentioned, of which is community. So nobody technically uses the word tribe or tribe anymore. This is I go to, I was thinking the other day that like everywhere has their own community. Like it's either you're a Cafe Nero person or you're a Costa person or you're a Starbucks person. It goes that deep into kind of where you get your coffee from. So people do like that sense of belonging and that membership, and that whether it's just knowing where you belong and knowing that there is a wider circle of people that share that similar thing. So yeah, I guess we then change that word into community. So there can be aggressive communities, there can be communities that are for things and communities that are against things. And there is a sense of wanting to belong, and that taps into our innate desire, or not even desire, forget desire, our innate need as humans to connect with something that's outside of ourselves. Hey, you like the color blue? Yeah, so do I. And that's just us as kind of deep humans. You know?
Yeah. You saying that kind of makes me feel like actually community, whilst obviously there can be communities that forge over what can be perceived as negative things. When I guess community, for me, it seems it's less if you're part of a community, it's not, you don't immediately think of it other community as them rather than us. It's not necessarily us versus them type thing. I think going way back obviously into the tribe type way of looking at it is very much, you know, we have to do for us, and it is essentially whether it's competition for resources or whatever, that us versus them type thing. And then as you said, we're not fighting for survival. Well, in lots of different corners of the world, people aren't on a day-to-day fight for survival, but obviously that in many places they still are. But obviously where we are, that's not the case. So you would argue actually, where does tribal thinking really, or where could it possibly come into things really? But as you said, it's that need for belonging. And I think it's almost like it overspills into things. And obviously that tendency to find that want to find that belonging. You can do it obviously over trivial things, as you said, you know, look, let's put up a poll, who likes Bounty versus Snickers versus Twix versus Kit Kat. And then you can have like it in a very jokey way, but then you've got, case in point, over the past month, we've had football. Sports is a massive kind of area for people to, and that's where I think I would say you can definitely call them communities, but I think the way that things like sports run, it's very much more like tribes, you know, because it is very much a us versus them type thing, because it's kind of supposed to be. You want your team to do well. You're not looking for the other team to do well. And some of the things that, well, over the past 72, 96 hours, I think you've seen different behaviors that may link to that type of thinking, that us versus them type thing. Whether it's, you know, it can present itself, I know across a lot of different matches, a lot of ones that I saw obviously involving England, whenever the national anthems were played, you've got certain England fans booing the other team's national anthem, which to the layperson just would be like, why is it that deep that you need to boo another country's thing? I think that's where things like tribalism even come into it. It's like, when you're part of your tribe, it's the us part, and then everything, it almost goes into that, I guess, moral tribalism. So I think that's what I found out about that, is that, you know, when the possibility of somebody even possibly being in another kind of tribe or whatever, or thinking a different way, that's when you can get obviously like slander, a lot of vitriol, and it moves a bit more towards that moral tribalism of like, almost, we are good, everybody else is bad. So you doing those behaviors of like booing somebody else's national anthem or whatever, you're not going to be thinking, oh man, we're the bad people here. It's like, nah, we're the good people. It's like a lot of the time, obviously, I know in this country we kind of bring up World War II a lot. There's a lot of that type of good versus evil type thing that people want to bring into it to make, I guess, feel a certain way. So yeah, that's not necessarily linked to the first question I asked, but I wanted to drop that in there.
So, like, I guess one of the follow-on things from that then would be, I'm not too much of a psychologist, just understand what it is to be human. And that desire to belong to something, and that desire to know that you're connected to something. Is there also a desire to dislike, as possibly the weakest common denominator of the word? Is there an innate desire to dislike an other? So, again, I'll run with the coffee analogy. I'm a Costa drinker. They're like, oh, hey, I'm a Starbucks drinker. Like, I hate Starbucks. Is that like, does it come hand in hand? Does it come hand in hand with does it come hand in hand, I can agree, does it come hand in hand with something else? So yeah, it's a very kind of like interesting kind of moment. If you know that you belong to something, does it also come in with a sense of dislike of another?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that probably, I would say that that would depend on people and how they were brought up. Because if your environment you're growing up in, what's applauded and what's talked about is about how a group or you, the person growing up, or if it's about you being better and therefore everything else being less than, if that's the kind of modeling you receive from the older generations or from your parents or whoever you live with, then yes, I think you'd learn to do that. Because yeah, I think that if you learn to sort of share and to appreciate differences from a young age, then I'm not sure that you'd grow up with that sort of mentality. But also, because I've seen young people growing up, so year sevens coming into secondary school, and they're very innocent, some of them. But as soon as they start to interact with the older children, where there's they model something different, they model other behaviors, then they start to absorb those behaviors that are more, what's the word? That are more competitive. So I do wonder if that's got to do with, yeah, just modeling human behaviors. Who knows?
Could be right on the money with that. I was going to say hi to Sophia. I think she's just dropped out. Well, let me throw this in. So this is like on a classroom activity thing that I found online. What they say is tribalism can have very negative consequences when it is used to exclude individuals or groups or to take away their rights, status, or independence. These negative aspects of tribalism are often fueled by competition and the perception of a common threat. So they promote fear, anxiety, and prejudice, all of which can make us more susceptible to fake news, propaganda, and conflict. So I thought the whole thing about competition rings true to kind of the base instinct that we, I guess, have in when we group together over certain things. So I guess to use like the coffee analogy, because somebody liking something that's a bit arbitrary, like different coffee shops, is less, I would imagine, being less likely to drive that type of thinking, unless I suppose maybe somebody feels that it poses a threat to their own identity. But then because, especially, I mean, unless like there's a coffee chain that's actually, look, I know people, when Starbucks became big and then started to really take over a lot of places, people still obviously feel a way about Starbucks and like giant corporations in general, but it could well be that some of that came from the threat of it taking away maybe their more independent coffee shops that they have to become a new Starbucks, and that's part of their identity and so on and so forth. It maybe that's looking at it very in a way too deep type thing, but I think when things, as it mentioned, pose a threat, it can increase that thing, and then it's easy to obviously prey on people's fears of what that may mean, similar to what people do in politics.
So maybe continuing, I guess, I don't know where we're continuing to, but continuing, difference, if not well educated, nurtured, cultured, experienced, definitely experienced. So difference, using some of those words, if not well nurtured, can in turn be experienced as a threat. And as soon as you experience those differences, if not well nurtured, that threat then triggers a response which is tribal. which could be expressed in aggression or dislike or prejudice or any other kind of active word against a threat. So I guess going back onto the topic of which is tribalism, and if we was to kind of define the word just within our conversation, say, hey, tribalism is a negative connotation behind a community that is kind of aggressive. So tribalism is when we see another tribe as a threat and we're responding to that other tribe. Can we influence that? Can we engage with that threat? Because I guess it's always, I'll flip it on its head entirely. So check this out. So when I was engaging with the people of Nottingham in the average going on to Matthew 25:40, one of the peoples was, I can't say the word threatened, but I can definitely say the word felt uneasy at the genuine expression of compassion and understanding and love. That person did not know how to respond to that expression because they've never felt like that. So sometimes there is always I guess the difference is probably a very broad word that covers a lot, but the difference can also trigger quite a lot of response, to which I guess we can't always account for. I concluded something and then I doubled back on something, of which is pretty. So yeah, feel free to either conclude on how do we engage with differences of how do we engage with people that are able to that respond to threats, or how do we engage with differences?
Good question. That does bring, I guess one of my questions I did have was like, how can differences be bridged, and do they need to be? So we could skip to that if that makes sense. Well, what I want to say from the first question is, let's say over the COVID, actually no, not even the COVID period, over the last, let's say 3-4 years, just yes or no, do you feel that people have become more tribal in their behaviors and thinking and dealings with other people? Cool, that's all I needed to hear. All right, so should we look at how can differences be bridged? And actually, first of all, do differences need to be bridged?
I think that's that first question. If not, that, first of all, they're two good questions, but that second one's a banger.
It probably depends on what differences, because not everything can be bridged. Like you can't change someone else's experience and treat someone else as if they've got your own life experience. So there's always going to be differences in how we view things from the get-go.
Should we say, before we even tackle that question, what do we mean by bridged? Because I'm like, I guess some people might take bridge to mean
you're going to
come to the same conclusion.
That's elementary stuff. The bridge is saying, all right, cool, I respect your point of view. Because if I'm building a bridge, exactly as you were saying, one of the things where he's trying to say, oh yeah, cool, I'm going to make you come onto my side of the island or waters or whatever. But now, I guess the development is, especially when you're developing relationships with tribes, saying, hey, this is where we stand, this is where you stand. Oh, I like the sweetness of a Costa. I like the acidity of a Nero. And it's like, oh yeah, cool, I understand. All right, cool, I understand. And then that threat, because there is a mutual and understanding for one another's likes and dislikes, there is a, all right, cool, you stay there and I'll stay there. But if somebody's just like, I don't understand why they do this or why they, and then that disconnect is maintained, I guess. And here comes the word respect. Like if there's a respect for differences, then this is it. I'm gonna shut up.
And mine is going to like the extreme examples,
Talk that talk.
which is not probably the most useful. So I can see why some people would say, so it's me understanding people that would not agree on bridging on certain things. And I've seen it a lot in people I've had in my life where they're very arbitrary. It's either this or that. There's no in between. I don't want to engage if it's the other camp, whatever. And like, for example, if someone's done illegal stuff or does illegal stuff, it's like a lot of people say, I don't agree with that, point blank. Therefore, I don't want to engage with the type of person that engages in illegal activity X, Y, and Z. And then my mind is like a murderer, for example. Even though they can have other qualities that they can respect. So that's, yeah, it's like, can you actually bridge with everyone and everybody, with every single different type of person? I rest my case. I'll leave it there for you guys to discuss.
Are we called to? That's, yeah, well, it's funny that when you did mention, I think when Jerome, when you were talking about the whole bridging thing, and thinking of people as, or people or communities or what have you, groups of collective people as islands, and then lots of different islands that are obviously separate. And then you build a bridge, as you said, it's like a chance for somebody to, is it like the equivalent of somebody sitting down with others or allowing themselves to hear others as to why that island has the collective outlook, ideologies, culture, whatever that they have, and they have a bridge to also go to the other side and do the same thing, to bring that, not to say, okay, I want to join your island, but to understand why that island is an island there. I would lean for the question of, do differences need to be bridged? I think there needs to be a working towards, I think there needs to be a general, what's the word? There needs to be a desire to, otherwise, I think it's like, as you said, so like your example of the murderer, it's so quick, especially with the kind of very quick reflex reaction that we can be brought into. It's like, I think I read something today about I think he may have been a serial killer or something being released after like I think a review into his release was denied, or like the review happened and then they into the parole board and his release was still approved. And obviously people's reaction to that is going to be pretty, for the most part, one-sided, to say this is a terrible decision, the person should write whatever, bring back the death penalty. That comes up a lot, I'm sure. And it's obviously those things are natural. You feel that if somebody's done something, then obviously as humans we grade things like murder is, if not the worst, it's definitely in that top category of like the worst things you can do. But if people, I look at it more in the sense of, if people all took the collective action to not want to bridge things, to understand why, there'd be no real, I guess we'd be a lot further back in terms of like restorative justice, and I guess, allowing people to re-enter society and rebuild and I guess, I don't know, and this is looking very much more in a kind of prison type thing. Show remorse and reflect and genuinely turn a corner. But it's by far probably one of the most difficult things to do. Obviously, there's some people it's incredibly easy to like bridge that gap between, or try and build that bridge between, to understand. But then, as I can't remember, you may have both said it, but you can't know somebody else's life, what leads somebody to where they are, why they do the things they do. It's that big, it seems to be a big mix of the internal and the external environment to whatever degree of each one. But I think the biggest thing that limits everybody, as well as obviously a desire not to bridge that gap with people, is time. Like the amount of time it would take to sit with every person that you meet to build that connection and hear and actively listen to see where somebody comes from and understand that would take many, many lifetimes. So obviously we have to pick and choose. If somebody's done something reprehensible, you're going to feel like, you know, that person's not worth it to even be heard. Why am I wasting my time? But I feel like if not everybody, some people need to, which is why we're all called to different things. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I find it interesting what you said about there's definitely, there needs to be a want from each side of the island to build that bridge. And then there needs to be time. So when you start to think, oh, I don't want to build a bridge with that person or that tribe because our differences are too big, or our values are too different, or I don't think your values are worth my time to build a bridge with you. That's interesting because that automatically sends us into the zone that we're judging the other instead of trying to actively respect and understand the differences. And I think that those two are opposites. Like judging is not respecting someone's differences, if I was to put it very simply. So it's, I guess, an automatic decision that people sometimes do, like automatically separate A from B.
So this may be a little bit too like deep, but I'll say it anyway and see what comes of it. Yeah, like I like what you just said there. I was thinking it, the whole judging thing. Another thing that could also prevent, and people don't really like to speak on it, but the amount that can be understood through a human lens is miraculous because we all share the same setup. And sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of the times, more often than not, we forget that we're all part of the same kind of, we need the same food and we need the same water, we have the same desires. And then that, through that lens, it allows us to be able to connect more often, a lot more than we can disconnect from. The fear, and this is kind of the contentious point, is the influence. It's kind of saying, all right, cool. If I open myself up to this kind of thing, I'm going to be influenced by that thing negatively or positively. All right, cool. Like, yeah, I could give so many examples. I could give examples all the way from bad all the way to Jesus, to be just like, all right, cool. Right now, that influence would influence me like X. This influence would influence me like that. And that arm's length and that reticence and that lack of desire to connect with that thing is probably why a lot of people don't want to bridge gaps.
Agreed. Influence, yeah, that probably plays a big part. If you're part of a group who has successfully been able to remove that whole human lens from people to say, okay, almost like the whole dehumanization thing. If you can remove that successfully from another group, then you're even going to be even less willing to want to kind of build that bridge to kind of understand their outlook and things, because look, you don't really spend your time doing that with people who you feel are less than, or whatever you feel is less than human. You know, if you don't spend your time chatting to ants to kind of get their view on things, or maybe some people do, but I can imagine. I'm not even, well, actually, no, let me leave it there. Some people do. I don't know who those people are. I may know who some of those people are, but I'm not sure. But yeah, once that's kind of stripped back from someone, I think it's difficult to reverse. I mean, it has, like, this whole topic has so many different areas you can take it, like, because something that's fascinated me is like cults as well. Like, how does a cult form? What really is a cult? What kind of differentiates that from just a group? Something I could have very easily Googled, to be fair, but like, how do these things kind of descend into that, and then what is their outlook in terms of looking to the out group and their in group and those types of things? How is it that they become so adamant, and it's like this super extreme of no bridges around them whatsoever to anyone else, to protect that structure? But yeah, I suppose influence probably plays a big part in terms of the morality side of it as well. Like, if, as we kind of tend to do without necessarily thinking, you know, if you are part of your group, you believe that your group is acting out of, you know, good intent, love, we are good, we are rational, we're logical. The other groups are irrational, illogical, bad, evil, whatever kind of terms you want to use, then, you know, you're going to be that less willing to build that bridge again because you don't want that type of influence on you. So yeah, I can definitely see how it would play a massive, massive part. And also probably comes to your points on when you mentioned how people are raised with the outlook and how they kind of connect with other people growing up.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of it is got to do with identity and how rooted you are in a certain identity. And because I think Jerome talked about safety and fear. So if your identity is a certain thing, therefore you're going to attach yourself to that kind of community, that kind of group, or that kind of tribe. And if somehow you feel that identity is being attacked or judged, therefore you're quick to judge the other identity, to say, no, my identity is the best. Like, that's who I am. Because if I was to say, no, my identity is not the best, okay, or if you say, if my belief is not correct, then my identity is not correct. If someone's got that sort of thinking, therefore it's easier to place blame or wrong on the next person.
And to double down on your existing community.
think I lost.
No, I'm supporting what you're saying, literally, because you was probably it didn't help that I interrupted.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
But I was just saying, and to the Alex, help me, please.
Is it, I guess you're with your community and then like, I guess imagine you had like a lock on it after you kind of, as you mentioned, go through that phase of them wanting to double down and you like get a triple lock on it to say like this like you pour cement on it pretty much in,
Sure.
you know, be like, this is
My belief, my identity, my community, we can do no wrong.
That's it. And you may probably end up in a more combative position where something simple that wouldn't have really, you would have kind of been able to discuss in a normal and reasonable way is seen as like
An attack.
opposition. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like how, you know, you want your body to be able to react to something like pollen in a very reasonable way. But some people's bodies will see pollen and go from like green to deep red in the space of a second. It's like pull out all the white blood cells, every single attack, get it all out, like guns, weapons, machine artillery. I don't care if we kill the body to get rid of it, as long as it's got to get gone. But yeah, that's, I think, sometimes how people can do it when you become so deep entrenched in your own identity, as you mentioned. And I think that probably adds a whole nother question I hadn't really put towards, because I hadn't really brought identity into it, but it feels like a whole separate topic because it is so big. But actually it links to the question that was in the middle that I was going to ask second, but we can either dip into that now, or we can go back to the how can differences be bridged. So I leave that to you guys.
We've answered that.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think by trying to understand the other.
In that case, well, my second question was going to be, if so, what have been some of the causes, if the case, as we've kind of agreed, that we have become more tribal in our thinking and behaviors? And I think, as you guys have posed, identity and the fixation and acknowledgement of identity may be one of them. And I leave the floor open.
Yeah, I like what somebody said about the fixation of when you challenge someone's community, in turn you're challenging their identity. And from the top of the conversation, when we were saying it's innate for us to form communities that match with our identity, it becomes one in and of the same. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm not going to become too theological. I don't fancy sitting from that mark today.
Cool.
Feel free to. No, please don't.
So, is it that perhaps as we have now reached, I guess, 2021, people, I mean, not to say that people weren't looking inside themselves more, maybe people are just exploring themselves in newer ways? And is it that we're tying too many things to our identity that are just things? In that, you know, look, personally, when I see myself, I see it's just, you know, I'm Alex Owusu. Underneath that umbrella is many things. I'm male, I'm Black, I'm Christian, I'm all, like, there are lots of things, but I don't look at everything through Black lens, male lens, you know. There's a lot, like, I wouldn't look at somebody and think that they are super basic and they're just, you know, one thing. I can look at someone and know there are a multitude of things without having to go through every single one and know that everything is a lens. And I think maybe sometimes with people wanting to kind of carry a billboard around them with every single thing that they are, you can be hypersensitive to simple things that somebody says that you then maybe, again, get a lot more deeply entrenched into your corner, your tribe, whatever it is that you think. If you feel that it's being attacked, it's like, you know, you just say one thing, it's like, good morning, and somebody takes that in some certain way. It's just like, I had no idea that that was gonna kind of set that person off, you know. Ooh, that's dope. I am created. Agreed. I do feel like no matter your belief, I feel like you gotta take that and like, you didn't create yourself.
I mean, you say that, but you'd be very surprised at the amount of people that, you know, they're like, I create my own future. Me, that. And, you know, and it's all well and good. I'm not saying people don't put effort into their own lives and into their goals and stuff. But I guess it's when you place all the importance in, you know, in the things that you talked about. So you can put all the importance about your background in life. You can put all the importance in the type of family you've come from, all the importance in the type of money you've had growing up. And if you entrench, if that becomes your identity and therefore you're part of that kind of group, therefore everything else is not good enough because they don't know how hard I had to work to get here type mentality. You know, you can say they never know how hard I had to work to get here. But at the same time, someone with that thinking won't know what the other group might have gone through in their own experiences of. So I think I'm just going swings and roundabouts.
I hear you.
What was the question?
The question was, the question was, the original question was, what have been some of the causes? And then we went to talk through identity. And is it that obviously people have a lot of labels and things that they carry around with themselves 24/7? That's not a question, is it?
Oh yeah. The one I wanted to say, and I think I mentioned in the beginning, is that people can express their opinions very easily. And it's easy to find a tribe, even if it's not in close proximity physical. There's lots of things that are online where you feel you have your tribe.
Random aside, do you feel that one of the causes may be, and whilst I'm sure people wouldn't ever necessarily say, yes, that's me 100%, or own up to that, could it be that with people kind of wanting to build their identity and then obviously close off from bridging those differences and learning and understanding other people, that actually there is more fragility about their identity than they could potentially let on to say, you know, similar to your whole influence thing, John, I was saying, you know, obviously people in general can like to post, you know, you talk a lot to kind of sometimes hide certain other elements. So it could be you talk a lot to say, you know, I'm X, I'm Y, and Z. Almost like to remind yourself and can like ensure that you've got that circle that is you iron tight in your mind, but without kind of realizing it may be that kind of highlighting actually that it's very fragile and that actually worry that even almost subconsciously, that other things could then break that circle, and then if you then, that circle is broken, it's like, who am I?
Yeah, and that's kind of like yes, yeah, yes, and yes. And that's why when I was listening to you list off some of those things that you could correctly tick by your name, the impact of putting all of your stock or all of your identity, all of your self chips, your soul chips on those identities, there is a consequence to that. And then again, when we start backtracking and start talking about the difference, and then when we deem those as threats, and then wherever you're secure on those identities, therefore you don't necessarily see a difference as a threat. But one of the things to which we all can say, obviously, excluding those people that manifested their own selves, which is a conversation which I don't think I'd like to get into. Everyone has been created, and saying like, hey, I've been created, you've been created, like we've been created, like how does that sit with you? Like how does that sit with you as a living and breathing identity? How does that, do you want to raise arms to that statement? If you want to raise arms to that statement, then I don't know, because I've never had a conversation. As I say, I'm not trying to seek that smoke right now to engage with somebody that does not want to say that I've not been created. But one of the things to which, and probably one of the final points for myself, when I'm engaging with people, regardless, one of the things of which I take deep joy in doing is finding commonalities. And then from those finding commonalities, the first instance, is then it allows for a relationship to be developed, and finding differences and saying, hey, based on all of those things to which we share, of which at times, at the best of times, is kind of deep and very personal, these superficial or negligible differences can be bridged. And like, hey, am I going to burn all these bridges for the sake of this difference in the bridge and X, Y, and Z? And that's kind of where, for me, being a person that has been created, it gets a lot of joy of connecting with other people that have been created. You guys are going to hear that so much from me now, from now on, by the way. So yeah, that's kind of my shut up.
Good bar. It's a good bar. As Sonia said, like, don't get it twisted. Somebody, somewhere, somehow will find a lot of smoke to that. So yeah, man, just be prepared. Don't feel like, yeah, as you well know, no sword fights or anything that is not your speed, but just be prepared for the smoke when it does come. I don't know how, I don't know in what way, but somehow, some way, it's like, what is it? I swear there's an episode in Fresh Prince, like when Will goes into this bar with like Duchess, somebody that Jeffrey knows from like back in England, and like they walk in, you see some guys like, what do you mean, thank you? And the guy just throws them across the bar. So yeah, even if you say zero, somebody could find an issue in you. So you're not saying nothing. So yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. There was one last point, if nobody wants to add on to that. And it's again from that article that I found, and it's to do with social media. Surprise, surprise. It says, today, social media makes it easier than ever for individuals to connect with other members of their tribes and ignore or deny information that threatens their worldview. Social media algorithms are designed to drive engagement and as a result, prioritize content that touches on negative primal emotions. These algorithms bypass institutions that were designed to manage our base tendencies and urges. And whilst that's not a question, that's more of a statement, but I thought it was very interesting and probably as concise as somebody could possibly put it. because I was gonna, I think, lean on that as one of the, not causes, but one of the things that has continued to spark a lot of why we are leading down that road. Somebody needs to say something.
Believable. So Alex, I was going to just ask you to put some more color on your thoughts, because like, are you saying that like that statement, despite the fact it may be true, and I know that you also agree it's true? What a question I'm going to ask. So we're saying that social media is now formed an algorithm to tap into people's base desires and base instincts.
That's what I was going to comment on.
Someone.
It's like, I find interesting that's a thing. And my colleagues were talking today, and I quickly left the conversation. I was interested. We talk about social media, and there's a TV show called, I don't know the name, it's on Netflix. It's about how social media is like dictating people's lives nearly, and how you receive content that you know you're going to engage with. And it's interesting what you're saying, that the content that they will engage with is negative content, or content that brings about more differences than it brings, I guess, positive stuff.
It's yes. So the algorithms are designed to drive engagement, and as a result, prioritize content that touches on negative primal emotions.
It's crazy. Because like, when I use social media, and I have been using, so Facebook videos has been a downfall as of recent. And I start to watch a video, and I noticed it months now. It's been a few months.
You got
I start watching like dog training videos, or videos about puppies or dogs. My mom just got a dog, but that was like a year ago now. And then I started to get like the Victoria Stilwell videos, and she's a dog trainer. And probably for about a month, that's all I got to watch, because once I start to like the posts, that's all I used to get. Like, more often than not, every 2 videos, it was her. Every other video was her, in fact. And there was 2 of hers more like in a row. And then later on, I saw something similar to her video, which is the child training person. Forgot her name, Nanny, Super Nanny. And I was like, oh, I like this. So I started liking that post, that video, whatever. And then all I was getting was Super Nanny posts. So for 2 months, I was just watching Super Nanny instead. And then I started watching something else, and now something else. And now what I'm watching through, I guess, interactions on social media is something that I never thought I'd watch, which is Made in Chelsea. I don't watch that show. Like, I hate that kind of stuff. But that's the stuff that I'm now watching all through what Facebook is like showing me. I know that's scary. And it's interesting that this show Made in Chelsea, what it's doing is like, oh, look at the relationship between those 2 people. Look at how he is. Look at how she is. And that's sort of the stuff that I was watching. So now I'm kind of like, I don't watch Facebook videos anymore. I try to avoid it, because it has tapped into something that's really negative, when actually what I used to watch months ago was like super nice and super positive. So that's...
You know, the thing is, right, without it giving you reason for excuse, obviously deal with it. But the amount of data that these guys have, they have everyone the data from how long we look at something to what we look at. Some songs even track where our eyes go. They listen to what we talk about. Like, the amount of data to which they have access to, as kind of tapping into, continuing on from what I just mentioned about, from a human perspective, connect with other humans. These guys can connect with other humans from a data perspective. the whole world. It's like, cool, people of this kind that live there, that basically demographics, the amount of insight that these guys have is somewhat criminal. And I have no idea. I did a presentation, and I don't know why I'm connecting these two, but I'm going to connect them into it anyway. I did a presentation at school, and the children are they're present, but they're not present. And then when I acknowledge that a large amount of their time is spent on phones, and then I connect the statement to which a person that I know has said, like, yo, these algorithms are, and I've even experienced it, like, so smart. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if these algorithms are just sucking their interests and their passions into the abyss of data, into nothingness. And it's a shame, because all it is for views and for marketing and to progress, sales, and profit.
I was trying to remember the name of that show on Netflix, but it's called The Social Dilemma, and I watched it. It's interesting, and yeah, it speaks to a lot of what you guys are saying. And yeah, it's weird. I guess I can imagine what it's like in an assembly, like speaking to a room full of kids, or even in the classroom, where like it's like, I think everybody's been in that position where you've been with someone. Obviously, like, you've got things like, let's say somebody's on a particular drug or whatever, and you can see that they're really vacant. But then obviously there's a much more obviously prevalent thing where it's just, they are, as you said, they're just not present. They're there. They can maybe hear you, but they're just not present. And it does, yeah, create a lot of dilemmas of, I mean, everything's a double-edged sword, but what that documentary highlighted is that, you know, look, nothing is by accident. Everything that they do is very much well known. And as that whole kind of tapping into things that kind of, what does it say, touches on negative primal emotions, is not going to be anything unbeknownst to them. It's not going to be like, oh man, I didn't know. It's just, if you understand the psychology of general populations, I guess, then you can use that, and then data then helps you inform that. And if the primary end goal is what we can kind of pin most things on is money and greed, then it's gonna essentially drive pretty much everything. So look, you can obviously on the other side say, look, we're connecting people, we're allowing people a way to kind of bond over shared things. We're doing X and doing Y, but it's like at the expense of a lot of things, and creating more tribalistic thinking. And I mean, politics is probably one of the biggest ones, and then misinformation and so on and so forth. And it just continues on, and it makes people less willing to see or sit down or have those conversations with people like we were talking about before. Less willing to see people as individuals, but just, you know, I don't know, like almost just a collective group. It could be 1,000, 10,000, but if they're on the other side, they're just almost like they're dead to you, you know? So anything that happens, and I know they've done lots of different social experiments in terms of, you know, how people view who they term as an out-group, and it can relate to things of perceived punishments that they feel that somebody on the out-group versus somebody in the in-group should face, and all sorts. So it has a lot of worrying ramifications for life as well, unfortunately.
Could you imagine tying two things in together now? How those things tie into tribalism, and how they bridge and further separate the ability to bridge gap if things are becoming more and more extreme. And people are now getting tailored information to further interests. Oh, I care about growing my biceps. All I see is biceps and stuff, like massive biceps. And then flipping, you see somebody that cares about, I don't know, gardening you. It's just like continual extremes of situation, because that's what's selling nowadays, extremes of stuff. I'm really gonna shut up.
Yeah, and then anything outside of your tribe is not good enough. Therefore, you're not trying to build that connection. It's interesting. I was going to make a point and I forgot what I was going to say earlier as well. Bear with me a second while I...
Yeah, we can equally, it will just encourage, while sometimes you can obviously then passively say, okay, I don't want anything to do with the other group. But then what it can also do, and what it's probably encouraged, is more people to attack the other, or who they perceive as another group, when actually in prior eras, maybe they would have just let it be and just said, you know, that's not my group, and leave it be. So it's like two camps that would have originally just kind of done their thing. Now it's more like, if you know there's another camp, you have to attack it without any real rhyme or reason.
I actually heard something on the radio today, and it was actually about how we people, we are very likely to, when we fall short, to make excuses of ourselves, or to sort of be like, oh, this happened, because to justify our actions or inactions. We can do that much more quickly than for someone else's perceived faults and mishaps. So this was actually said on the radio, and I think, you know, bridging the gaps and making bridges between different people, different communities, I think it is about, okay, if I can have grace for myself in that way, and if I can give myself all justifications in the world for how I think or act a certain way, it's about allowing other people, obviously, to do the same, but us giving the people the opportunity to actually say, this is how I do things because X, Y, and Z, and actually realize we're both doing the same thing. We both have our own ways to be, and we understand, or we think understand ourselves. So it's allowing, or give permission to the other to do the same thing.
Giving that same grace to someone else. So like, take the speck out of your own eye type deal. It is interesting to see. I'm sure this is the same for everybody. There's surely been times when everybody can say that they have not used the measures that they use for others on themselves. And it, like, you see, oh, can't believe that X did Y. Meanwhile, you're doing X, Y, and Z. But yeah, we're often probably give ourselves a lot more grace than we give to other people. So if there's any takeaway from this conversation, watch The Social Dilemma.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting discussion. It's been good to hear different kind of sides and understanding of how, the why, what can be done, what needs to be done, if it needs to be done, ramifications. And I suppose, I'm sure in each of your heads, things kind of rumble about, okay, individually, what is it that I can do? What is it that we can do? What is it that we're already doing? So yeah, man, I think it's a topical thing for us individually, as part of Matthew 25:40, and just in general as friends. So yeah, it's always good to be aware of things, to kind of constantly check yourself, because it's super easy, I think, as people to quickly fall into things because you're in a echo chamber. People tend to surround themselves with people that, you know, have similar outlooks, because otherwise it'd probably be quite tiring, constantly being rebuffed and your opinions being like counted and whatnot. But there's obviously that danger as well if you don't look outside of that, engage with other people and build those bridges to understand, then, well, it can lead to things that we've seen and currently and things that have happened in the past, I guess. That's my closing part done.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. The mission, find commonalities and yeah, give grace to people. Thanks. You gained a lot.
Cool, thank you. That was fruitful.
So I'm going to stop the live.